So this might be the most bang for your buck slider on the market right now. What's up everybody, Corey with Freaky Tech Reviews here, and today we are checking out the TopRig S60 slider from Accsoon. This slider has a lot of features packed into a very simple design, and it's all for a really solid price, so I'm really excited to show it to you today. So let's check it out. Before we dive in, I do want to mention that the slider was sent to me for review, but that does not impact my thoughts on it because there are several areas that I would like to see improvements on. Diving into the specs, the TopRig S60 is designed with portability and functionality in mind. It has a total length of 24 inches, but offers 16.7 inches of camera travel, so not going to be the best for panoramic shots, but it's going to be great for things like talking heads, interviews, and product shots. It weighs in at about 5.5 pounds, so it's light enough to carry around, but it is sturdy enough because of the quality of the materials to handle a payload capacity of up to 4 kilograms or 8.8 pounds. Now, one of the standout features that you immediately notice with the S60 is its built-in parallax system. This allows you to switch between focusing on a single point for product and interview shots while also achieving smooth panoramic shots and time-lapse shots, all without any extra attachments. To use the parallax, you simply loosen the two knobs and slide the ends depending on how you want your camera to rotate. It then turns as it glides down the rail and provides great fixed point shots for horizontal and even vertical movements. And also, the motor is plenty powerful enough to handle these vertical shots effortlessly, and I'm actually very surprised at how quiet the motor is even whenever it's going up and down, although I am using a Canon R8 with a 35mm macro lens, so it's going to be pretty lightweight for my setup, but for other setups it might be a bit more of a strain on the system. But I think for the most part you don't have to worry about background noises during your recordings. The slider runs on a Sony NPF style battery, but it also has plug-in options for those longer shoots. Personally, I like to use battery pass-through cables for unlimited power, but honestly the battery life on this thing is fantastic, and even whenever I was researching other content creators that had reviewed this slider, they had mentioned the battery life, and I have to say I have not been able to get the battery to go down at all, so it's going to be a great wireless setup. And speaking of setup, it is incredibly user-friendly. It turns on super fast and you can start shooting almost right away with no need to fiddle with an app, which I'm a big fan of, although there is basic app support if you need it, but it is very limited. This slider is designed to be used with the physical buttons on the unit itself, and that's where it really shines. To use it, you simply press the start and stop button after you turn it on so it calibrates the payload. You then move it to your starting point and press the AB button for point A, and then move it to the second point and hit the AB button to set point B, and then you can choose for it to either make one run back and forth or it can loop continuously. And one of the best features on this slider that I've not seen a lot of others have is that it has a speed control knob where you can adjust the speed while it's in its movements and performing those in real time, so you can actually almost even kind of create your own physical speed ramps while you're filming. And speaking of the overall speed of the slider, it can move very quickly at its top speed, but then if you turn it all the way down to its lowest speed, it is impressively slow moving on the very lowest setting. So I will say that you can almost barely perceive that it's moving, and this is a really good spectrum of speed and control that this slider has. Now, if you're looking for something a bit more compact, then there also is the S40 version. It's a bit smaller with a travel distance of about 8.8 inches, so that's an option if you need something that's even more portable, but you're going to get a little bit less functionality out of such a small slider. Now, diving into what I really like about the S60, and then we'll talk about what I didn't like. I'll start out with the pros. This slider is so incredibly easy to use. The fact that it powers up so quickly and you can start shooting without needing an app is a huge plus in my book. I used to use a Zeppon micro slider, but they stopped supporting the app, so it's basically turned into a paperweight, which is extremely frustrating. So I am all about using hardware that does not rely on software. That's a huge plus for me. The build quality is another win as well. It's solid, sturdy, and it feels like it's built to last. And I love how easily you can switch between focusing on a single point and panoramic movement with the parallax system. And also, the motors are quiet, which is essential when you're trying to capture clean audio. Even whenever the motors are on full speed, you can kind of hear them, but it's really not that loud. And plus, I've already said it, the speed control knob is just amazing, and it's super handy for making quick adjustments mid-shot. Now, it's not gonna have all of these crazy pan tilt methods like a lot of sliders have, but for the price of this thing that we'll get into in just a little bit, it's gonna be really hard to beat. Now, with that said, there's a lot of things that I really like about it. However, there are some very obvious cons that I want to talk about. One of the challenges I faced using this slider was centering the slider with the turning knobs. It's tough to tell if your shot will be perfectly straight because it just uses these little notches and you can't tell if you're perfectly lined up, but especially when you're trying to eyeball it as the only way to see if you're moving straight, that makes it really tough. And really the only way you're going to be able to tell, especially if you're using macro footage, is when you actually get into editing to see if it's moving on a straight line. So that's definitely something that I'd like to see, some type of lock-in mechanism to make sure that it's perfectly straight. And speaking of those adjustment knobs, one of them's in a really awkward spot and it makes it super difficult to reach, especially when the camera is mounted right above it. It's just hard to get your finger down in there and spin the little thing so you can loosen or tighten it. The other thing I'll say is that the physical movement of the slider after setting the A point and then moving it to the B point feels like it's a little bit rough on the motors. And I'd love to see an option where the motor lets loose so you can move it quickly without worrying about hurting them. A company that I think does a good job of this is Edelkrone sliders, where once you set point A, you can then effortlessly move it to point B, and it unlocks all the motors so that it's not making them strain. And this could be that I'm just using it incorrectly, but the instructions are a little bit vague because it just says move to point B, and then you're able to actually set that point. So it feels like you're going against the motors and they're staying engaged. And what would also help with this is that if there was a button to move the slider in a specific direction without having to let it complete its movement all the way down the rail first. Once it starts its movement, it has to go all the way to one end and then come back. You can't go either direction. Okay, so one thing that I realized after I'd done a lot of my filming that I needed to add to the dislikes part of this video is the fact that it does not have a slide lock and the camera can just slide really hard in vertical mode, and there's no way to keep it in one spot. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So if we take this and we put it in vertical mode, you can see that it slides freely, right? So I'm gonna put it down here at the bottom level, and then I'm going to turn it on. And it does have a 2.5 kilogram payload capacity whenever you are in vertical mode like this. So for my Canon R8 with a 24mm macro on it, it does fine. I'm doing the calibration right now so that it can go up and down, and then it always goes really slow down when you're on vertical. So just to show you what I'm talking about, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Let me make sure you can really see what's going on here. So let's move it down here. All right, so now it's at the end of its calibration. I would not advise moving it that quickly when you do this. And you can see like when I push it right back here, it still kind of goes down. It's still kind of sinking a little bit. But here's the problem that Accsoon needs to figure out immediately on the second version. If you turn it off in vertical mode, watch this, turning it off, look at that. It just drops your camera and there's no way to lock your slide. That's a huge problem for me, and that must be fixed on the next iteration of this thing because I didn't catch it the first time it did this to me, and my camera just fell and hit the bottom of it. So that needs to be fixed immediately. So anyways, as I was doing this video, I realized, oh, I need to tell you about that because this is not a good thing. But despite these drawbacks, the TopRig S60 is an amazing slider for the price. For $400 for the S60, and even less than that for the S40, the quality and smoothness that you get are practically unbeatable. The adjustable speed, ease of setup, and overall stability makes it a fantastic option for anyone looking for a solid slider under $1,000. But I would love to see a version 2 that addresses some of the big issues that I've mentioned, but keeps all the things that makes the slider great still involved with it. But I would love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you use sliders for any of your content creation? And if so, what are your favorites? And what do you like about this S60? And then if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and joining the Freaky Tech family and hitting that like button because it really helps the channel grow. We are trying to hit 20,000 subscribers by the end of this year, and I cannot do it without your help, so be sure to join the fam. But thank you so much for stopping by and spending some of your day with me. Again, I'm Corey with Freaky Tech Reviews. I'll see you next time.